Hey y'all, so not a huge crowd, so we'll keep it personal. I'm Carlos, Charlie Marketplace on Twitter. We're probably going to talk about all kinds of things, but we'll just start with who we are, our backgrounds, and kind of why we're talking about blockchain adoption. Would love to just keep questions coming, so just any random thoughts you have, say your name. Would love to follow you guys on Twitter too, and yeah, let's just have a good conversation. I'm Carlos, and this is Helena.
Hello, guys. Thank you for being here. Yes, my name is Helina. I'm leading emerging tech partnerships at ICE Addis. ICE Addis is a tech incubator accelerator hub that started 13 years ago in Africa. And actually, yeah, me and Charlie were just also talking about this. Sorry, Carlos. So when we started actually a co-working space, a tech hub, internet penetration was less than 1%. And of course, obviously, like, how can you think about starting a tech hub when people don't even have access to internet? Yeah, so it was definitely not easy, of course, because we also wanted to focus more on, the digital products that startups had ideas on. Yeah, but now 13 years later, internet penetration is 30%, still very low. Yeah, but we also do a lot of work in Web3 now, also training, community building. So we'll talk a bit more about that later.
And for my background, I'm a data scientist at Flipside Crypto. You've probably heard of our competitor, Dune. They're the top dog right now, but we're coming up. We do data infrastructure. We actually do node management. We do all kinds of stuff for the entire life cycle of crypto projects. My focus is on research, so really trying to get to the cutting edge of like how do you use the data that's being generated by blockchains to help these blockchains grow. So I mean, hearing Ethiopia and hearing about tech in Africa, I think you had some stuff with Cardano, right? Yeah, we'd love to hear some examples about like how you all are using blockchain in these more difficult technological environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, we did work with Cardano. Cardano had a presence in Ethiopia. They worked a lot on training developers. So then, these developers can create local solutions for local problems. So I mean, mostly I work partnerships on the community side. And, what I have definitely seen is, they're not only in Web3, but also, other organizations, whether it's in development, they are coming with solutions already built somewhere else, and it just doesn't fit to the local context, So it's very important that, you have local solutions that are made by local people because they know the problems that they are facing and how to fix them. So speaking about Cardano, so, one of the biggest projects they had there, which I'm sure a lot of you heard about, was actually creating digital identity for students. So, in Africa, there is a lot of trust issue, as you can see, so not only even from abroad, but also within. So a lot of people either have fake credentials and they get jobs, or even when they do have real credentials, they really have to work a lot on proving, that they did go to school and have this degree. So this is one problem that Cardano is going to solve with their digital ID, starting in the elementary school, because it's a program with Ministry of Education. But this is also going to go along later on to help maybe get lending. You can see actually, okay, these people are making this amount of money, so they can get loans, they can pay back. Another solution also Cardano worked on that was really amazing is basically giving liquidity and lending to SMEs. So let's say some woman has a small shop somewhere, and she obviously doesn't have a lot of money to stock up on whatever she needs to buy. So they created this solution to give credit, and it really helped because, so I mean, the banks, when we talk about like people are unbanked, they're really unbanked, and so the banks there mostly only give loans to big organizations, and to someone that has a small shop, they're not going to give any loans. So this is one great solution. Yeah, and then I'll say one more because I know we don't have a lot of time. Another really great solution was also they're creating a solution for, and this is not in Ethiopia actually, in Kenya. So they're working with basically to create land titles on the blockchain, because in Kenya there's a huge problem with like fake titles and
like
someone
land,
having
just
sort of
conflicts. I mean, it's funny because I mean I'm from Puerto Rico, and it's similar to a lot of other countries in like the South, South America too, and Caribbean. It's like, oh yeah, that's my grandpa's land. The only person who knows that's true is like his uncle who gave it to him before any paperwork, because it was before Spain gave Puerto Rico to the United States. So like it's all over the world that you just don't know what's true. So it's really interesting to hear that. I'm curious to hear about like, so you said like the SMEs. What is that? Small medium enterprises?
Yeah, exactly. So the small medium enterprises, it's obviously a word we use because of the development agencies, but yeah. So anyone that has a small business. So whether it can be your, like I said, mom and pop shops, or it could also be someone selling airtime to flip it, or someone just doing any home deliveries. Just a small business. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
I'm curious to hear like, you mentioned internet adoption is very low, and what I've read is that there's actually like not a lot of broadband in these emerging markets, that it's all mobile first. And for me, being from the United States, like I have the exact inverted crypto experience. I'm curious to hear from you guys. Like, do you have a private key on you right now? Just curious. Do you have a MetaMask or anything on your phone that has a private key? Okay. My OPSEC background in government is I would never do that. Like I wouldn't leave 20-mile radius of my house with a private key. And then you hear these emerging markets where like, of course, that's the device. So I'm curious to hear like, how has that framework affected how you all are doing your startups and things like that, like being mobile first versus like maybe the opposite?
So for us, it hasn't really affected it so much in terms of the work we do. But I think what it affects more is, so for example, schools are not connected. So obviously every child is not going to have a mobile phone, right? But yeah, for sure, I mean, you definitely have like slower internet and things like that. But I think the most community that is impacted, I would say, are the students. Because actually we also kind of tried to see how, with working with Ministry of Education, like how many schools were connected all over Ethiopia. And it was like, the number is ridiculous. Only like maybe in the main cities is where there's actual infrastructure. And also, so education is important. So I think they're the ones that are more affected versus the startups.
Maybe I'm just curious to hear from you all. Is there any questions that you all have about what you think the future of blockchain adoption is going to be in any of these contexts? Otherwise, I can give you a rant about the importance of data and why it's so hard. Are we still going to care about blockchain in 5 years, or will it be a background technology? I'm the person who disagrees with everybody. I think it's going to be so front-facing. I think it's going to be the way that people are like, oh, I have an iPhone, I have an Android, and there's a stark contrast in how your digital experience is. If you, like earlier, if you were at the Fashion Talk, to be on the Threads app, Facebook, Twitter, you had to have an iPhone. If you have an iPhone and you get a text message from an Android, you get a green text, right? And these little differences do have like a lot of downstream effects on like how you experience devices, how you expect to interact with applications. So I think it'll be front and center. I actually do. I think the chain you prioritize, the virtual machine you prioritize, I think it will maybe not be top of mind. Like I don't think I'll be like, oh, I'm on EVM, you're on Solana, that's crazy. But I do think it'll have a very big impact on like how you experience common digital things. What do you think?
I agree with you. I do think that it's going to be really adopted by a lot of people. And I don't think that blockchain is going away. It's here to stay. Crypto is here to stay. I'm talking more also from what I see in the, in the market or the area I live in. So when we talk about, for example, when we talk about crypto adoption in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, and also Ethiopia. For one, that wouldn't happen if there wasn't a peer-to-peer system, right? P2P, because on-ramp, off-ramp is hard, and also, besides Binance and a few others, of course, like for example, you cannot have a Coinbase account even with your ID from Ethiopia. And the adoption rate has been like really crazy because people are actually using crypto to basically run away from the problem that there are like inflation. Not only that, but also to be able to trade goods with people. So, for example, in Ethiopia, there's a huge foreign currency shortage, and there was a shortage of medicine, like even like diabetes medicine, and then people are like, Binance also started operating there, just P2P, and then people are actually like, oh, okay, there's this solution, so we can actually send crypto to, the people we're importing from in China or wherever else, So people are seeing it more and more. And also, and one other application I really like, company is Bank. They're using basically airtime as a way to, get crypto, top up, or whatever. And, people are already used to this because of, like, for example, with M-Pesa and airtime, people were already used to sending each other money using airtime, right? Because it was much easier.
What is airtime?
Like airtime when you're buying credit for your phone, so you can have calls and internet.
Interesting. So you're seeing people kind of tokenize other things that are not necessarily crypto and using that as like an intermediary?
Exactly, yeah.
Yesterday there was a talk from BitTrail. I don't know if any of you went to that one, where they kind of said like, oh, one of the most popular things we're doing with crypto right now is you use crypto to buy gift cards, which eliminates a lot of problems around off-ramping because you off-ramp to like a single intermediary who then just gives you company money essentially on this gift card. And there's a very interesting argument, especially from like, not Blackstone, the other one, BlackRock, and Larry Fink, the CEO there. He's like, oh, we're going to tokenize everything. And I'm very curious about that future where like, oh, it's not just everybody using ETH and it's not everybody using USDC. It's every single company having their gift card tokenized, and you just switch to them and it's seamless. So I'm curious to hear about like a little bit more about airtime and like what you're seeing, like what currencies are people using on the ground that are not crypto or not stable coins or not, Ethiopian currency?
For example, grains, farmers use grains for means of exchange. Like grains like flour, like teff, like what's a grain we have in Ethiopia, like stable foods. So.
Oh, I love teff. I eat injera all the time. I love Ethiopian
okay.
food.
Okay, perfect. I think airtime would have to be used a lot because everyone has their phone. I would have to say that in terms of like when we are going to talk about what might be relevant for crypto. But like goods, people use goods as money.
Yeah, now works. So one question for you relating the off-ramping solutions there are right now in Ethiopia, for example. I'm very familiar with M-Pesa in Kenya, for example, Tanzania, and I really saw it as a way of like escaping the banks, and people can easily transfer money from peer-to-peer, but was always fiat. What happens in Ethiopia if you have stable coins, for example, that I know that maybe nobody use stable coins as a way of paying? You have to off-ramp at some point and have the proper fiat. Companies are being like pressed by the government to do any kind of KYC or something similar that at that moment maybe they get taxed and they are not interested anymore. How is that working, or what do you see the future there?
I think I said a bit about this earlier. So people are using more peer-to-peer. In Ethiopia, actually, you cannot really on-ramp, off-ramp for, let's say, like for Binance, like because the banks just don't want to, right? So people use peer-to-peer, but I think maybe a better example I can give you is about Nigeria. So Nigeria in the beginning, the banks were like okay with this, right? But then the government started cracking down, and so when people were actually even like sending and receiving money, the banks would freeze it. It just wouldn't go, and you might think someone is like also scamming you. But yeah, so people have just turned to peer-to-peer. So you just have, people mostly trust Binance. Also now Bundle is pretty big there, but so just peer-to-peer.
And at the moment you need KYC in Binance?
Yes, yeah, you do.
Okay, and there is not any friction there?
No, because what I've seen is, for example, even in Ethiopia, in the beginning, you couldn't really get KYC'd on Binance unless you have like an actual passport, right? An Ethiopian passport, they can read that, and many people don't really have passports. They just have the, like the local ID, and it's in Amharic or like the other many languages we have, and you couldn't use that, but now you can. They actually started working with a local company to basically be able to KYC the local IDs. So a lot more people are using it. So, but yeah.
Thank you so much. My question is around what you just addressed. Initially, like you spoke about Nigeria, there was a lot of onboarding. People were excited about using cryptocurrencies. But then at some point, the government came in and then decided to shut down most of them, or even all of them. Even Binance at some point lost their license. And if we are moving to a stage where we want to still encourage people to adopt crypto, to do all those informal activities, what kind of practices do you think we should put in place? For example, a few months ago in Nigeria, as an instance, the government placed some limits on cash withdrawals. And that forced even the traders in informal markets to go create bank accounts. And then they now accept online payments in the markets. So how can we create a culture in the crypto space or in the blockchain space where people can see this kind of seamless onboarding? Even if it has to be KYC, how do we reach the unbanked, for instance, in this case, the uncrypto kind of people?
Okay. Actually, I really like the question you asked, because this is something I always think about, and but it's not only for onboarding, like for crypto usage, but I think what we need to do is focus on, like for example, training developers. We mentioned Cardano earlier, but we pretty much work with many other organizations, not only Web3, Web2, to kind of help, like what I was talking about with like creating a local solution instead of already coming with one. So I think what we need to do is we need to really focus on the local developers and help them create, whether it's DApps or anything, because they're the ones that will know what their community is facing, and they can come up with creative and good solutions, right? So, yeah.
And maybe going in the exact opposite direction, because I agree, like the ideal scenario is local first. Like if people, like crypto's digital cash, right? Like the whole thing is digital cash. Like I can hand you 20 euros right now and the government doesn't have to know. And I can do the same thing with ETH. And that pisses off a lot of people. What do I expect will actually happen? I expect there'll be like two kind of paths, and they'll go in parallel for a bit. You'll see random people say, I have a Circle account or I have a Tether account and I take USDC through the main app. Circle is an app that most people don't even use. They use the coin, they don't have the app. I'm one of them. And there will be that experience. Tron, for example, is 5 billion in USDT. It's like the most popular chain in the world for transferring stablecoins USDT. It's like the remittance chain for Central America. We will see that. We will see like random people just coalesce around certain coins and infrastructure. But we're also going to see the exact opposite, and it's hard to think about, but Visa will have a layer 2. It'll probably be an optimism layer 2. MasterCard will have a layer 2. JP Morgan, Bank of America, all the multinational corporations will have layers that they completely control and control the sequencers on, and they will settle on a variety of layer ones. They probably won't build their own layer one because there's a lot of problems with fragmenting liquidity. When that happens, that's when we get to the point of like some of the stuff's just in the background. You're using your credit card to swipe, and you don't know that this person is in the Visa Layer 2 program, so instead of a 3% take rate on the credit card, it's a 0.5% take rate, and the merchants love it. And what's going to happen is that the spread on some of these businesses are going to get so tight because blockchain's so good at the settlement problem. And if you follow that train of thought, what you're actually going to experience is, oh, like, a whole class of people won't ever have MetaMask. Their bank app will just be that much better. They won't have Rainbow Wallet. They won't have any of these things. The current system will just become so much better they won't have to. And that is going to clash. Like, local people doing local things without KYC is going to run directly into multinational corporations who are now 10 times more efficient, faster, better. The apps are better. Transfers are instant. And I don't know who wins that battle. But people are like, they're kind of stuck in the present day thinking, and they're not realizing when Visa decides to spend $1 billion integrating their layer 2 into their payments infrastructure, 1 billion people will not download MetaMask. Like, that's the effect. No, I don't. I think CBDCs are going to fail, mostly because there's so much money in having the spread of like I said, Visa takes 3% right now. The New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, whatever, they take like a few bips, which is 1/1000%. Like, there's so much money in the spread that they will never let government completely manage like the monetary system. It'll end their business. If the U.S. government comes out with FedNow for regular people, Visa's dead. So it's not going to go that way, I don't think. And that's the reason, like, kind of the big corporations getting involved. Do you think it's going to happen in Ethiopia and Africa?
It's really hard to say because I mean, yeah, a lot of the central banks are talking about this now. I mean, even Ethiopia is. I'm really not sure. Maybe is it because of the foreign currency shortage, and they think that will alleviate it, or maybe is it because, like, of course, they do get like, you know, kind of. They do get like some like, not ideas, sorry, I can't think of the word, but basically they work with like World Bank or IMF, and they'll tell them, oh, listen, this is the things you can do, consult to them. So I'm not sure if it's a push from that. I don't know. I think I would say no. I don't think that CBDCs will take over, at least in, I mean, become popular or used. Yeah, I mean, for example, I think Egypt has been saying they're going to do this for a while, and yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it reminds me, there was, if you probably saw this tweet recently, because someone at the World Economic Forum, which isn't like a single organization, but people kind of say it is, they said, oh, CBDCs are great because governments can like prevent the transfer to known parties that sell drugs or sell pornography or sell alcohol. And now everyone on Twitter is like, the CBDCs are going to stop you from buying the best stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, don't buy drugs. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen the way that we are worried it will. All right. Any random questions on random topics? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe a bit another direction, because I think the overall idea was to discuss also adoption. So you mentioned that there is also this idea that blockchain is basically a base layer, and so that's a bit what we are also considering. We are currently, so I have to say, I'm working in a development finance institution, German one. So it's an institution that finances development projects in what we call the global south. So one of the projects we are looking into is in Kenya, and they use a technology called USSD, which is basically addressing people who don't even have a smartphone. They only have a feature phone. So it's the technology is basically like these old short messages. So no graphic display, very cheap phones. And so they need a specific service that bridges basically from the crypto world into these into their payment world. Kenya has this, as M-Pesa is a very broadly adopted technology. So maybe that's another direction of discussing adoption of digital distributed ledger technology, not talking about crypto, but talking about more broadly what can the technology do. And in these projects we do insurance services basically, and the idea is that blockchain technology has a transparency basically included. There's an audit trail, well, if we use at least Ethereum technology and a public chain, and it's very efficient. The old system is a very bureaucratic system. Using that technology cuts a lot of costs. So these are the main arguments for using the technology.
Yeah, I like that point a lot. So if you, I don't know how technical some of you are, but if you look at how most blockchains work, they have something called RPC, remote procedure call. And it's really funny because, you know, your experience in MetaMask or whatever is you open it up, you connect to a website, you click a button, and it pops up with a transaction, you just say, yeah. But what's really happening is that there's a bunch of like really annoying JSON being formatted for you that's essentially texted through the same way we use the internet, HTTP, to a node that says, hey, if you format your text correctly, I will do the transaction for you. So when you hear like all these, you know, Geo, which is an Indian phone that's popular in sub-Saharan Africa and stuff like that, like you can text a blockchain transaction. You can actually do Bitcoin transactions purely via radio. They've tested it out, and it can be done. A node can pick up a radio signal that includes a private key confirmation. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we are going to see a lot of standardization around how do you get the simplest possible behavior, which is like send money, to be as simple as sending a text message. And I think we will see that. The problem from my end, being a data scientist who deals with like the data side, is like there's not really any standardization of this stuff. I mean, QuickNode, Figment, you know, Blockdaemon. You just go through the node companies, and then you go through the chains. 10 node companies, 50 different major blockchains. That's 500 different ways of submitting a transaction to a network. And then for each of those networks, there's multiple clients that then have to parse that out. So we're talking in the order of like 1,000 different ways to send a message, 100 or so for just a single blockchain. So it's a very difficult problem space to get there. What are you thinking?
So, I mean, yeah, you're right. So when we're talking about adoption, crypto adoption, we should talk about what can be done. I don't know when you got here, but in the beginning I mentioned briefly that you like in Africa, why crypto was adopted this way, and it didn't happen. It could not happen without P2P, right? Because again, there's the issue with on-ramp, off-ramp. But then also when people are doing P2P, of course, they're not using, Pancake Swap or whatever, right? But when, again, I have to talk about Binance a lot because they've really done so much in that region. So, when Binance comes into a market and really enables people to be able to exchange their, fiat, that's really shitty to stable coins, and they're able to transact. But they also do that by creating awareness, like training people, creating small communities, because someone, unless they know someone that knows about crypto, when they're having a problem to be able to import goods or send money to someone, unless there is this awareness being created, it just wouldn't happen. So yeah, I think awareness creation training is very important. Again, also, another one is what I said earlier. You really have to, I know you said you don't agree with this, but creating solutions by the local people, because a problem we have in Ethiopia is not the same problem people have in Kenya, and let alone forget it in Nigeria, which is even further away, right? So I think it's very important to make these developers aware of blockchain technology and what they can do, because they're the ones that can really kind of kill the pain that people have.
On that point too, about I think I agree on the importance of like the localization effect. What I worry about being on the data side is that like we're doing this thing where we're like constantly repeating ourselves, where like for example, Cardano used Haskell, Solana used Rust, Ethereum used either Viper or Solidity. Like the language that you're programming these things in introduce debt and they introduce constraints, and so like we have to get to a point where one of these technologies has to just start winning so that everyone's building on the same thing the same way. Because, I mean, I would estimate like 80+% of the advancements that are happening in crypto are just duplication of effort. I mean, like how many AMMs do we need? Like how many perpetual protocols do we need? How many NFT standards do we need? And it's not just that it's hard to create them, it's also hard to use them after they've been created because we can't all agree. So I mean, I would love to see a future of like, my own bias, I would love to see Ethereum Virtual Machine, the compiler part, win, and then everybody else is developing locally on local like layer 2s that compile to the same virtual machine. So I would love to see like a both somehow.
Yeah, okay, again, yeah, so when we're talking about, people adopting crypto, the fastest way that can happen is if someone actually really needs it, right? So, I mean, so like I said, again, people in Africa are really not using crypto to trade and like, flip their money or whatever, or to buy NFTs, mostly. I mean, of course they do, but mostly, right? But they're actually using crypto. I mean, the mass adoption right now, the numbers are insane. Like, I mean, I don't know from the top of my head, but when we talk about Nigeria, 140 million people live there, and the adoption rate is crazy. I don't know the exact number, but also in Ethiopia, there was an example I mentioned earlier. People are using crypto because like people weren't able to import medicine. So when there's a dire problem like this, then people will start using it. But of course, yeah, all of these other fancy things are also important, but it depends where. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to speak to the issue he raised about existing technologies like USSD. I think there's a problem in some regions in terms of accessibility or getting the ability to use the best in market technology. If you want to use USSD for blockchain, there are lots of problems that come with that, especially when, for instance, to configure a short message code, you have to go register with the government. So you're centralizing that. And to give Nigeria as an example, during the protest like 2 years ago, people were crowdsourcing to support youths to fight for their right or to speak up. But they were using Bitcoin for this. What did the government do? They went about looking at their accounts that were receiving remittances from these crypto wallets. And when they see you sending money or receiving money from this, they block your account outrightly. So even on crypto, purely on crypto, they could still do some of these traces. Then one begins to wonder, if you go USSD, where you have to pre-register, there is a central entity they can block, and your messages don't even get through, or the money gets deducted and it doesn't get to the endpoint. So we can enable adoption, but we can stifle access. So people are using it, but they are not fulfilling the essence for which they are adopting it. So I also want us to maybe also think of, while the technology might not be a problem, we might also think of other causes. Blockchain in itself might be good, but someone has a motive to control it. For instance, if it's for healthcare domain, health is a basic need that everyone needs. Is it possible for us to build services around this that use the blockchain, but not necessarily in its sense? Maybe there's a consortium around it, maybe a bit of, let's say, FDC control or the healthcare sector control, or some kind of way to enable access and adoption at the same time, but not to relegate an improved technology to an existing old technology that doesn't actually fit it. So that's how I would see USSD, blockchain on USSD or something, vice versa.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about like credible neutrality. And if you heard some other talks about like what that means, right? It's like, oh, I need to know that like if I send a valid transaction, it will get put on chain. And to Hilina's point actually about like you need to have a need, right? Like the government will seek control because it's trying to help its citizens, and it's worried about things like if everyone in Ethiopia started using USDC and dollar-denominated assets, well, guess what? Their foreign reserves are going to plummet, which means they can't import medicine. So like these technologies are creating problems, and the answer to that is we do have to like solve the problems with this technology, because guess what? If Ethereum was a critical technology for getting medicine imported, and it did so by going direct to like wholesalers without going through, you know, these intermediaries. It was like it was cost effective, faster, and better to import medicine through blockchain. Then guess what? These governments would completely flip. They would flip to using this technology and supporting it. So like we are creating problems, and we have to not only stop that and also solve other problems. But like, yeah, I mean, there's a weird curve here of like it's great to this point and then it's terrible. So yeah, I'm curious. Like, so with that medication example, just curious what you're thinking.
Okay, no, maybe, yeah, okay. So, I mean, I just gave medicine as an example, but also cars and whatever, clothes, anything, right? But to your point, actually, what I want to say is, why would, for example, the Ethiopian government not want to adopt crypto? Because if people use, whether people use USDC or not, actually, since people are not using the dollars in the central bank, then, you know, the government would have more dollars, right? So it's the other way around, I would say. But I mean, for me, it's a question of like, why does the Ethiopian government not want to use crypto? It just would make so much sense. It would solve many problems because, for example, we have, you know, there's a bank exchange rate, and we also have what's called the parallel market rate, black market, you know. So the reason why the Ethiopian birr is also going down is because, you know, when you're buying from the parallel market, it's like double the rate, literally. So.
How are we doing on time? 5 minutes. All right, let's take a few random questions before we go. All right, if you don't have any random questions, I'm going to start talking about data. Go ahead.
How would you see some kind of unification of technology, as we were speaking about earlier, right? So like in the 90s, 2000s, everything kind of centered on Java, right? And that's what it kind of coalesced onto. How would you see that occurring here within our space?
I think there just has to be like very obvious winners, right? Like at first, when computers first came out, like they had to settle on binary. They had to settle on 0, 1, 1, 1, 0 being the way that we actually use these switches on the hardware to do certain things. You go up a level to like assembly, you go up a level to the compilers, you go up a level to the kernels and operating systems. Like you just had to have winners that became so obvious that people gave up on coming up with alternatives. So like right now there's Mac, there's like Windows, and there's like Linux, and even Mac uses Linux. So like we have to center around certain things that have won so much that it's not worth funding these alternatives. I do think we're going to get to a point where the Ethereum virtual machine will kind of win, and we'll see other chains like Solana or like, you know, the move chains like Sui and Aptos. They will just kind of say, oh, we're going to figure out a way to get our exact code to compile to be completely compatible with this other virtual machine. And that's when you start seeing things like, okay, everyone's going to agree at least on this one thing. We're all going to agree on the Ethereum virtual machine. And then that opens up so much, like a magnitude of order more opportunity of innovation, because you know that if you can meet this one standard, it will just work for everyone else to build on your thing. And we don't have that right now. Like I know so many people who are like, do I learn Rust or do I learn Viper? Do I get into Solana or do I get into Ethereum? That's like a bad situation that you know that you're committed to one track or the other, and it will, and if you're wrong, in 5 years you'll be a professional in a technology that doesn't exist. So we have to just see winners and kind of pick among them, I think. What do you think, Hilina?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there has to be winners, but yeah, we have to find a way of like, compatibility and making it easier for people to build solutions and yeah, kind of work cross-chain. So.
Awesome. I think we're like at time. So any random questions, or are we good to go? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.